he was caught on camera lighting brush and trees on fire along Alameda Street near Union Station.
Everything is just gone.
The home she's lived in for decades, gone after the Eaton fire.
People spotted someone who appeared to be trying to start a second fire nearby.
A huge wildfire is burning through thousands of acres in California.
The fire danger remains high today in parts of Los Angeles.
The infernos that recently swept through Los Angeles have left devastation in their wake, bringing entire communities to the brink of chaos. Amidst the smoldering ruins and ash-filled skies, a startling narrative has emerged, one that shifts the focus from natural causes to the disturbing possibility of arson. The recent fires in Los Angeles, particularly in areas like West Hills and Calabasas,
California fire emergency. Gil has been talking about this newest fire to pop up in the West Hills, Calabasas area,
have raised significant concern among residents and authorities. What began as a natural disaster has taken a potentially alarming turn, with reports suggesting that at least one of these fires may have been intentionally set.
Police have made an arrest of a suspected arsonist here in the community of Woodland Hills.
The unfolding investigation points to an unsettling truth. These fires may have been deliberately set, and one man with a blowtorch may be at the center of it all.
Essentially a person with a blowtorch, according to officials, who was stopped by some of the neighbors, and this was around the Kenneth fire.
According to reports, the suspect, a man seen riding a bicycle while carrying a blowtorch, was observed attempting to ignite various materials around the neighborhood.
An arrest was being made with a guy driving on a bicycle with a blowtorch.
Witnesses described him setting fire to items such as old Christmas trees and garbage cans filled with debris. These incidents occurred as communities were already on edge, closely monitoring the progression of nearby wildfires. The combination of suspicious activity and the immediate threat posed by the fires prompted residents to take swift action.
Around 4:30, we are told by several neighbors here that there was a man riding around on his bicycle with a large blowtorch, apparently attempting to set numerous old Christmas trees on fire, garbage cans with wood debris on fire.
Neighbors in the Woodland Hills area were quick to respond when they noticed the man's erratic behavior. Some followed him as he moved through the streets, and others intervened to detain him until law enforcement arrived. Eyewitness accounts suggest that the suspect resisted when confronted, but the quick thinking and collective effort of the community ensured that he was restrained and handed over to authorities. Police soon arrived on the scene, responding to what some residents described as one of the largest police presences they had seen in their neighborhood.
The LAPD arriving a short time later, taking this person into custody.
The suspect's behavior raised further concerns. Witnesses reported that he appeared agitated and uncooperative during the encounter. Some speculated that he may have been under the influence of substances, given his demeanor and resistance to stopping his actions.
I can't stop, I'm not putting this down, I'm doing this, and very focused on moving forward with the blowtorch, and we're like, we can't be doing that right now.
Although it is not yet confirmed if the suspect is directly tied to the larger fires, his actions have drawn scrutiny, and authorities are investigating any potential links between him and the blazes that have caused widespread damage.
A source in the police department telling us that this suspect may be tied to the potentially the Kenneth fire.
While the exact motive behind the man's actions remains unclear, the timing and nature of the incidents have prompted questions about whether these fires were part of a deliberate effort to cause harm. The fact that this occurred during an active wildfire crisis has only heightened the urgency of the investigation.
Possibly searching for any victims that may not have made it out of the fire.
For residents, the idea that someone could intentionally start fires while their communities are already vulnerable is both frustrating and alarming. At this stage, authorities have not released the suspect's name or confirmed any formal charges. A police source has suggested that the man may be connected to the Kenneth fire.
I think it's too early to really identify, but considering that any natural causes of the fire pretty much was not evident at the time, I mean, seeing things such as lightning, things of that nature.
One of the blazes that has garnered significant attention due to its proximity to residential areas. However, this connection has not been definitively established, and investigators are proceeding with caution as they gather evidence. The suspect is currently being held on suspicion of arson while authorities work to piece together the full scope of his activities. For the residents of Woodland Hills, the arrest has brought some relief, but it has also underscored the need for continued vigilance. This community, typically described described as quiet and peaceful, has been deeply affected by the fires and the events surrounding them. The quick action of neighbors in identifying and detaining the suspect highlights the importance of community awareness in times of crisis.
Or take care of people, but this is an example of neighbors stepping up to protect their neighborhood.
Their willingness to act when something seemed out of the ordinary played a crucial role in preventing further potential damage. Despite the progress made in detaining a suspect, many questions remain unanswered. Investigators are still determining whether this individual acted alone or as part of a larger plan. They are also examining the extent of the damage caused by the fires he may have started and whether his actions directly contributed to the spread of any of the major blazes. These efforts will take time, and residents are left to wait for clarity as the investigation unfolds. Among the structures threatened were iconic landmarks such as the Getty Museum, home to 44,000 priceless artifacts. While the museum's fire-resistant design and state-of-the-art systems helped protect its treasures, the risk underscored the fragility of cultural heritage in the face of natural disasters. Schools, small businesses, and places of worship, pillars of the community, were not spared either. The destruction was indiscriminate, affecting the wealthy and vulnerable alike. One of the defining factors in the rapid spread of the fires was the Santa Ana winds. These powerful dry winds are notorious for their role in California's wildfire crises. Blowing at hurricane-force speeds, they not only fanned the flames, but also dried out vegetation, turning it into perfect fuel. This created a feedback loop of destruction, with the winds pushing flames faster than anyone could react. These winds, a natural phenomenon, became a key accelerant in an already catastrophic scenario. But amidst these natural forces, another sinister element emerged: the deliberate act of arson. Investigators revealed that in certain areas, the fire's origins were not accidental. Reports of an arsonist lighting fires along vulnerable stretches of dry vegetation sent shockwaves through the affected communities. This revelation magnified the fear and anger among residents who were already grappling with the devastation. Witnesses described seeing a suspicious figure near one of the initial fire zones, and surveillance footage captured what appeared to be someone deliberately igniting a blaze. For residents, this betrayal, a person exploiting an already perilous situation, was unimaginable. Firefighters, who were already battling the elements, now faced the additional challenge of combating fires intentionally set in strategic locations, further straining their resources. The discovery of arson's role in the wildfire crisis highlighted the human capacity for destruction, even amidst nature's wrath. It added a chilling layer of complexity to the disaster, emphasizing how human actions can exacerbate an already dire situation. While the authorities worked to identify and apprehend the suspect, the news deeply unsettled communities. How could someone exploit such a fragile moment for destructive intent? It left many residents questioning their safety, even beyond the immediate danger posed by the flames. Climate change has undeniably amplified the intensity and frequency of wildfires. Rising temperatures, prolonged droughts, and extended heat waves have made vegetation drier and more susceptible to ignition. Scientists point to studies showing a nearly 200% increase in the area burned by wildfires since the 1970s, directly linked to climate change. These fires are no longer seasonal. They are becoming a year-round threat, challenging the very way we think about disaster preparedness. However, when arson is introduced into this volatile mix, the consequences become even more devastating. A single spark, natural or man-made, can now result in destruction on an unprecedented scale. As the fires raged, emergency services faced criticism for their response. Some residents questioned why more resources weren't deployed earlier and why water shortages hindered firefighting efforts. Others highlighted the lack of coordination between local, state, and federal agencies. The disaster exposed gaps in infrastructure and preparedness, raising urgent questions about how to mitigate future risks. Adding to this criticism was the challenge posed by the arsonist's actions. Firefighting strategies, already strained by limited resources and unfavorable weather conditions, were further complicated by the deliberate setting of new fires. It became a game of containment, with firefighters racing to prevent new blazes from merging with existing ones, a nightmare scenario that would exponentially increase the scale of destruction. The human stories behind the headlines were gut-wrenching. Families torn apart by the chaos, children clutching their favorite toys as they fled, and elderly residents struggling to evacuate brought the tragedy into sharp focus. For some, the fires moved so quickly that there was barely time to escape, let alone pack belongings. Parents scrambled to shield their children from the sight of encroaching flames, trying to maintain calm even as their own fear threatened to overwhelm them. In one particularly harrowing account, a mother recounted the terror of evacuating with her 2 young children. The smoke was so thick that visibility was nearly zero and the heat was unbearable even inside the car. As embers rained down, she whispered reassurances to her children, though her own heart raced with panic. "I kept telling them it would be okay," she said, "but in my mind, I wasn't sure we would make it out." They eventually found safety at an evacuation center, but the experience left them shaken, their home's fate uncertain. Elderly residents faced even greater challenges. Some were unable to drive or move quickly enough to escape the fast-moving flames. Neighbors and emergency responders worked tirelessly to evacuate those most vulnerable, often carrying people to safety under dire conditions. One rescuer described navigating through a neighborhood engulfed in flames to reach an elderly couple trapped in their home. "The smoke was so thick, I could barely breathe," he said, "but I couldn't leave them behind." Amid these heart-wrenching stories of loss and survival, the role of the arsonist cast a long shadow. The deliberate setting of fires in a community already under siege was seen as an unforgivable betrayal. For families who lost their homes to these intentionally set blazes, the pain was compounded by the knowledge that their loss was not just a tragic accident, but a deliberate act. One father whose home was reduced to ashes expressed his anguish. "Knowing someone did this on purpose makes it so much harder to bear. It's not just nature's cruelty, it's human cruelty." Others recounted harrowing escapes through walls of flames, unsure if they'd make it out alive. A man described how he and his wife drove through a tunnel of fire, their car's paint blistering from the heat. "It felt like we were driving through hell," he said. "Every second, I thought the car would catch fire." They made it to safety, but the experience left them deeply traumatized. For those who chose to stay behind to protect their homes, the consequences were often dire. Some underestimated the fire's speed and ferocity, believing they could defend their property with garden hoses or improvised barriers. Tragically, many of these individuals found themselves overwhelmed, their efforts no match for the inferno. Others simply ran out of time, realizing too late that the fire had cut off all escape routes. Emergency responders repeatedly urged residents to heed evacuation orders, emphasizing that no possession was worth risking their lives. The arsonist's actions added another layer of urgency to these warnings. Authorities warned residents to be vigilant, not only against the fires, but also against the possibility of someone deliberately starting new ones. This dual threat heightened the tension and fear already gripping the region. For many, the idea that a person could exploit such a crisis for malicious intent was incomprehensible, a stark reminder of humanity's darker side. As the fires finally began to subside, the full extent of the devastation became clear. Entire neighborhoods were reduced to rubble, and the air remained thick with ash and smoke, creating a health crisis that extended far beyond the fire zones. Hospitals reported an influx of patients with respiratory issues, and authorities declared a local health emergency. For the survivors, the emotional scars were just as profound as the physical ones. Families mourned not only their lost homes, but also the loss of security and normalcy. The knowledge that some of this destruction was intentional only deepened the sense of betrayal and grief. For many, the aftermath was as devastating as the fires themselves. Entire neighborhoods were reduced to rubble. The air quality plummeted, with ash and smoke creating a health crisis that extended far beyond the fire zones. Hospitals reported an influx of patients with respiratory issues, and authorities declared a local health emergency. The emotional scars were equally profound. Survivors spoke of feeling disoriented and uprooted, their sense of security shattered. Amid the devastation, acts of kindness provided glimmers of hope. Community centers became hubs of support, offering food, clothing, and shelter to those affected. Volunteers worked tirelessly to distribute supplies, and organizations like World Central Kitchen provided meals for displaced families. Public figures also lent their support, with Prince Harry and Meghan Markle meeting with first responders and victims, highlighting the need for global attention and solidarity. The financial cost of the wildfires was staggering, with estimates running into billions of dollars. Insurance claims soared, and the rebuilding process promised to be long and arduous. Yet the intangible costs, lost lives, fractured communities, and the psychological toll were immeasurable. Many residents wondered how they would ever recover, let alone prepare for the next inevitable fire. California's government called for an independent investigation into the fire's causes and the response. The newly formed Los Angeles Regional Wildfire Investigative Task Force aims to determine not only the origins of the fires, but also potential connections between them. This initiative reflects a growing recognition that wildfire management must evolve to address the increasing complexities of these disasters. The wildfires also reignited debates about land management and urban planning. As development encroaches on fire-prone areas, the risks increase. Experts advocate for stricter building codes, better land use policies, and investments in fire-resistant infrastructure. The lessons from these fires must inform future decisions to minimize the impact of similar events. For survivors, the road to recovery is daunting. Rebuilding homes and lives will take years, and the emotional scars may never fully heal. Yet, there is resilience in their stories. Many express gratitude for what they still had, their families, their communities, and the support of strangers. This resilience will be the foundation on which they rebuild. As the smoke clears and the ashes settle, the LA wildfires serve as a stark reminder of our vulnerability in the face of nature's wrath. They highlight the urgent need for action on multiple fronts: climate change mitigation, improved disaster preparedness, and community resilience. While the scars of this tragedy will remain, they also offer an opportunity to learn, adapt, and build a future that is more resilient to the challenges ahead. The LA wildfires were a stark reminder of our vulnerability in the face of nature's power and the consequences of human actions. As communities rebuild, the lessons learned from this tragedy must guide us toward a more prepared and resilient future. From addressing climate change to strengthening emergency response systems and fostering a deeper sense of collective responsibility, we hold the power to reduce the impact of future disasters. The images of charred landscapes and broken lives will remain etched in our memories, urging us to act with greater urgency and compassion. Together, we can honor those affected by working to prevent such devastation from happening again and build a safer, stronger tomorrow for all. Joe Rogan's discussion about the wildfires in California raises essential questions about how we manage our land and respond to the growing wildfire crisis. While it's clear that climate change is a significant factor, Rogan's insights suggest that addressing the issue requires a more comprehensive approach, one that considers both environmental policies and effective land management strategies. To reduce the frequency and severity of these fires, we must consider both the impact of climate change and the human actions that have contributed to creating the conditions for these fires to rage out of control. Change may be necessary, but it requires a shift in how we approach fire management and environmental protection moving forward. There's no denying the undeniable connection between rising temperatures and the increase in fire activity. Higher temperatures cause more moisture to evaporate from plants, making them more flammable. On top of that, the unpredictability and irregularity of rainfall have created conditions conducive to fires. However, Rogan argues that climate change alone isn't the full story. He points out that the land itself is often unprepared for such extreme conditions. Without controlled burns, proper land maintenance, or any type of fire suppression strategy, the land becomes more vulnerable to wildfires. Rogan also explores whether the fires are simply a result of poor land management and climate change, or if they might indicate deeper issues related to urban development and environmental management. Over recent decades, California, particularly Los Angeles, has experienced a significant boom in development. As more homes and buildings are constructed, they encroach on areas once considered fire-prone but relatively untouched. This urban sprawl not only places more people at risk, but also exacerbates the fire problem. Developers continue to build in high-risk fire zones without adequately considering fire hazards, leaving communities ill-equipped to deal with the inevitable wildfires. As a result, when fires occur, the damage is significantly worse, both in terms of property and lives lost. Rogan's theory regarding urban sprawl raises an intriguing point. While it's often argued that cities must expand to accommodate growing populations, Rogan poses a critical question: what are we sacrificing in the process? By pushing development into high-risk fire zones, we not only neglect the natural environment, but we also endanger people's lives and properties. Rogan also mentions the role of zoning laws, which often fail to account for fire hazards when new housing projects are planned. When homes are built in areas that are historically prone to fires, they become prime targets for destruction during wildfires. But why isn't more being done to prevent this risky development? Rogan speculates that profit-driven motives often outweigh safety concerns, leaving fire risk ignored until it's too late. Another critical issue raised by Rogan is the scarcity of firefighting resources. As brave and dedicated as firefighters are, Rogan points out that they're often spread thin, especially during fire season. With limited resources and personnel, combating the scale of these fires becomes incredibly difficult once they've taken hold. The fires themselves are growing larger and more intense, making it nearly impossible to contain them before they reach populated areas. As fire-prone areas continue to expand and the number of homes in these areas increases, the firefighting community finds itself overwhelmed. Rogan emphasizes that the lack of resources is a significant issue that needs urgent attention. Firefighters are doing everything they can, but without proper support, there's only so much they can do. He suggests that more should be done to provide firefighters with better equipment, funding, and overall resources. While it's easy to point fingers at the authorities, we must also recognize the constraints firefighters face in trying to save lives and property in these situations. Rogan also touches on the psychological impact of living in an area constantly threatened by wildfires. The constant threat of fires hanging over Los Angeles residents has led many to become desensitized to the idea of wildfires. It's almost as if Californians have come to accept wildfires as an inevitable part of life. Rogan argues that this desensitization has dangerous consequences. When people stop taking the threat of wildfires seriously, or when they start to believe that nothing can be done to change the situation, it becomes even harder to address the underlying issues. Rogan stresses the importance of keeping the wildfire crisis in the public eye year-round, not just during fire season. By maintaining ongoing attention, we can push for meaningful changes to mitigate the effects of these fires. Compounding the issue, Rogan points out how the media tends to sensationalize wildfires without exploring the underlying causes. While it's easy to blame climate change or the political system for failing to act,